200 square miles of open moorland, desolate and beautiful by turns as the seasons wend their steady way over this most distinctive part of Britain's landscape. Near the great bustling industrial cities of Manchester and Sheffield, yet light years away in its peace and tranquility. Celebrated by poets and painters, loved by naturalists, and visited every year by over 15 million walkers following the call of the country, the chance to roam unhindered over the hills.
Last year, my wife and I was over the other side of Croshaw Head, at the back there, and coming towards Lord Brook. And there was a little quarry just off the track, and I said, I wonder what sort of quarry it was. It was marked on the map. Let's go and have a look. And this fellow with a gun says, you're not going anywhere. He says, you'll make another step and there's this coming. And he got his gun under his arm. And I said to my wife, we'll just sit here then and just stay here a while. He'll go, I said, and then we'll go up. Anyway, he must have read my thoughts. he waited a bit and did the same, then came back again. He came, as we thought he'd gone, he came back. He said, I've told you, you're not going up there. He said, if you make any move, I shall fire this.
I've always been partial to hiking. I go walking whenever I can to see all the beauties of nature, Randy Dale and all that way on. I've sometimes been lost in me travels when taking a little known track, but we having a tongue in me cake oil, I've never yet failed to get back. I got a bit nervous one evening, the road was deserted and still, and I hadn't seen a soul for an hour or so, and I thought I could do with a Jill. I was just on the point of despairing and starting bemoaning me fate, when I comes to a bit of a cottage with a farmer chap leaning out gate. I says, good evening, grand weather, and I charmed him with one of me smiles. I says, is it far now to Hayfield, or have I to walk many miles? He says, there's a milestone o'er yonder, thou needn't come a bothering me. So I thought, well, that's not very civil. So I says, well, I can't read, you see. Can I read? He says, there must be right gormless. There must be an ignorant mon. Yon milestone o'er there's just the barra, for it's one of them stones with note on.
I can remember going across the big moors near Baslow, and the gamekeeper came along and said, you're trespassing. And I said, we arrange a ramble across here pretty regularly. We haven't done any damage, we shan't do any damage, and I can't see why we're not allowed to walk across. And the bigger lads then said, well, what are we doing about it then? So I said, well, we're going on. And the gamekeeper immediately put his stick in front of my body and tried to hold me there. And the bigger lads come at each side, and we just pushed on. And he said, well, it seems as though I'm not going to be able to stop you. He said, but if I meet any of my colleagues, then we'll take different action. And we said, well, we shall only carry on walking, and we don't want any trouble. We're not out for a fight or anything of that sort. We've pledged to come out into the country. We've pledged to get as much fresh air and see the open country as much as possible, and that's what we intend doing.
I remember one instance in Blackbrook, climbing onto Kinder, when I climbed over a wall, and these three, whether they were keepers or whether they were farmers, I don't know, But they must have seen me as soon as I left the Snake Road, because when I climbed over this wall and turned round to get down the other side, it was fairly high. I had a shotgun stuck in my back, and there were 3 of them, and they got 3 dogs with them. And with a bit of flowery language, they asked me where I was going. Well, I had no answer to that. I was obviously trespassing. And one of these chaps said to me, he says, "Get back over that wall," he says, "and follow that faint track down to the road." And he says, if they don't stop on it, he says, "We'll set these dogs on thee."
Hold on a minute. He said he was trespassing. Why was he trespassing? Just now we were going on about millions every year roaming unhindered over these desolate and beautiful moors.
At one time, the moors in the Peak District were everybody's, common land where people could freely enjoy the countryside. But in the last century, they began to be enclosed by wealthy landowners, attracted by the lure of grouse. Grouse shooting was a popular pastime, not just with the aristocracy, but also with those whose money was being made in the industrial workshops of Manchester and Sheffield, the factory and the mill owners. And if there were to be lots of grouse, people had to be stopped from walking on the moors where they bred. So up went the fences and keep out notices. In came the gamekeepers to keep out those who did not belong. The sport, if sport it was, had become big business. The more grouse that were bred, the more that were slaughtered. It was not uncommon for more than 1,000 grouse to be killed in a day. So to keep the moors free for grouse shooters, the landowners did all they could to stop people walking on the land that had once been open to all.
Well, okay, I'm not sure I like the idea of all those birds being shot, but what I can't understand is why people would want to go walking over the moors. It doesn't sound much like my idea of fun.
Rambling struck me as something where you could get quietness, education, interest in what was going on around. I met people much more unfortunate than myself, and it was one of the ways of trying to organise the young people like myself. And at that particular time, the working boy and girl had not much else to do.
To me, the Sunday rambling was an escape. It offered a certain amount of, a little bit of bravado, a little bit of excitement by going across it, and at the same time it offered so much of a freedom that we'd never enjoyed previously. It also offered an opportunity for boys and girls to meet. And I think that this was the beginning, really, of where my generation began to feel that equality between the sexes was something real and should be.
There were other reasons too why rambling was so popular.
I mean, your job was awful, wasn't it? I mean, if you worked in the works at that time in the 30s, really, I mean, you did a 47 to 50 hour week. I often did more. And it was dirty and sweaty. And I resented it, of course, very much so. But I couldn't do anything about it. I had to work, didn't I? And you got a chance to get out onto some fresh air, into some beautiful scenery. You see, it was a mass escape on a mass scale too, because there were literally hundreds of us who went out. I mean, if we didn't go walking, we went cycling.
I took the young children out of this city to see a bit of grass. People who come to Sheffield now and who look at the city now, they couldn't dream of what Sheffield was like when we were doing this sort of thing. I had young people that had never seen a cow when I took them out into the country. And even when we got to Blackamoor and Stanage Rocks, you could see a bit of sunshine, and that was the first sunshine and open air. People, so half of them knew.
Surely, if so many thousands of people enjoyed rambling, something could have been done to open up the moors to them.
People tried. Attempts were made to get an act through Parliament, giving people the right to walk on the moors, and big public demonstrations were held, attracting thousands of people. But none of these seems to have any effect. The moors stayed closed. With the failure to legislate access, some ramblers began to think about taking direct action. And with the 30s depression, a new kind of walker was attracted to the hills. Young unemployed men and women who wanted to get away from the boredom and frustration are hanging around the streets of Sheffield and Manchester. They were impatient to get out into the hills. They formed their own sports clubs. One of them was the British Workers' Sports Federation, which had been organising regular Easter camps since 1930. During one of these camps at Roworth in 1932, some of the Manchester Ramblers took their friends from London on a walk. They had intended to go to Bleaklow, but were stopped and turned back by a group of gamekeepers at Yellow Slacks. The keepers threatening the walkers, most of whom in their teens, with violence. The walkers returned dejected, but more determined than ever to assert their right to enjoy the countryside without interference. Benny Rothman, at the time unemployed and a member of the British Workers' Sports Federation, takes up the story.
The penny dropped that if there had been a lot more of us, we would have gone on to Bleaklow because they wouldn't have been able to stop us. And from that point onward, the idea of a mass trespass grew. Not quite sure who coined the phrase, and we decided that we would have a mass trespass. We then decided that it would be over Kinder Scout, because that was the most challenging and the most prominent piece of moorland, certainly on our side of the high peak. As we went through stiles, the ramblers went through the stile and then waited on the other side till the whole body was through. In other words, no one was going to get picked up by the police who were panting in the rear. We went along the clough, and where Wolf and I had decided we'd have a go at getting up, he blew the whistle for a right turn, and we went right across in one long stringing line up the steep bank then on towards the top of Kinder. The story that we would be a threat to grouse was exploded by a little incident. One of the lads spotted a bird sitting on a nest of eggs, and they immediately posted a picket round that nest to stop anybody disturbing the bird. Grouse, obviously. And as we went up the side of the bank in a long string, a long line, we finally came up against the keepers, who of course had been watching all operations from the top through the usual binoculars and telescopes. They seemed to have telescopes more than binoculars in those days, like Coast Guards. And they came down the hillside from Kinder to meet the body of ramblers. Now the keepers had been concentrated onto that hillside from most of the adjoining moors, and in addition to that they'd enrolled a whole body of special keepers for the occasion, sworn them in or what have you. And this body of keepers came down towards the ramblers, waving the sticks and shouting, "Go back, go back." Of course the ramblers took no notice whatever, and when we met head on, they just pushed the keepers aside. One or two keepers, I should imagine it would be the temporary ones, were daft enough to lash out with the sticks, and those sticks were immediately taken off them. I've no doubt used against them, no evidence of that, but knowing how people react, I should imagine that happened. Wolfie is the only person I know of, Wolfie Winnick, who was actually clouted over the head with a stick, and he promptly retaliated by flooring the keeper who'd hit him, because among other things Wolfie was a damn good boxer. So there's one keeper went away with a sore jaw. Another keeper, a chap called Beavers, fell to the ground and he injured his ankle, and he was alleged to have had a blow to the abdomen in the course of falling or in the course of a struggle. And one young chap who wasn't with us, who wasn't a member of our organisation or our club, he went along individually to help this chap Beavers. And for his troubles, when the police came on the scene and they found him there on his own, they promptly picked him up and charged him with assaulting Beavers.
His name was John Anderson. He was arrested there and then by the police, The rest of the trespassers went on towards the top of Kinder. They saw another large party approaching and at first thought they were the gamekeepers. So they got ready for another fight. But as the group got nearer, they realised it was a contingent of the Sheffield Ramblers who had come up from the Edale to give their support to the trespass. One of these was Albert Shirtcliffe.
There was a group from Sheffield, be 30 or 40 of them, came up from the Sheffield side, and we just tagged on. We'd nothing to do with them at all, really, but we just tagged on, and we had a good day on Kinder. We got over the other side, and we looked down on the far side, this side of the, somewhere near Kinder Low, and we could see all this crowd in the bottom. How many there were, I haven't a clue, but there was certainly a great number. We'd no idea of all the trouble that had been on the other side, and didn't know that anybody had been sent to prison over the thing until we got back and saw it in the paper.
On the way back to Hayfield, the Ramblers were stopped by the police, who arrested 5 of them: Benny Rothman, Julius Klein, Harry Mendel, Tony Gillett and David Nussbaum.
The accused was sent for trial at Derby Assizes in July 1932. Between their arrest and their committal for trial, the charges were changed from unlawful assembly to the much more serious charge of riotous assembly.
The formal proceedings took place in the morning, and then there was a break for dinner or lunch. And we all trooped out of court. We didn't know Derby, we'd not got a clue where to go. We couldn't go to any of the fancy restaurants around, so we hunted around for a tea room. By the time we'd had a drink and a snack and got back, we were late. And all the court ushers were outside shouting, "Rothman! Nussbaum! Klein!" And when we came in, the Chief Justice there, Sir Edward somebody or other, was sat there with a face like thunder, and they gave us a terrific dressing down. You'd have thought we'd try to make off with the crown jewels if you'd have heard him. Instead of giving us the opportunity of saying what the situation was, I think we were 10 minutes late, that we were looking for somewhere to get a cheap snack and we apologised, etc. Oh no, that wasn't good enough for him. Wouldn't let us open our mouths, gave us a terrific sherricking and instructed the court that we would be kept in custody overnight. So at the end of the day's proceedings, we were then bundled off to Leicester jail to spend the night there. But it solved one problem for us, where to stay for nothing. That's one problem that was overcome. And the way that they were treating working class kids, because that's what we were, was too shabby for words. For example, I was conducting not only my own defence, but the political defence of the whole thing, you know, why we'd done it. And I'd been carefully taking notes. And when I got to Leicester, they didn't want to know. They wouldn't give me a light in my cell. So I arrived back not having been able to even prepare a proper statement of defence because of the lack of facilities.
The jury consisted of 2 brigadier generals, 3 colonels, 2 majors, 3 captains and 2 aldermen. Despite obvious contradictions in the prosecution evidence, the jury found 5 of the 6 guilty.
Rothman, guilty of riotous assembly and incitement to riotous assembly, 4 months imprisonment. Nussbaum, guilty of riotous assembly, 3 months imprisonment. Gillett, guilty of riotous assembly, 2 months imprisonment. Klein, guilty of riotous assembly, 2 months imprisonment. Anderson, guilty of committing an assault on temporary keeper Beaver, 6 months imprisonment.
Harry Mendel was acquitted of all charges against him.
There wasn't evidence of one single blow being struck or threats to anybody. This was the thing that they got away with. And they got away with it because we were a weak organisation, young kids, and because the big rambling organisations stood aloof and they gave no assistance whatever, except after the event. Then, of course, they were full of good advice what we should have done.
After the Kinder dispute, they decided that they were going to hold a meeting in Sheffield to organise a protest at the activities of the police and the keepers over the Kinder Ramble. There was a meeting organised in the Victoria Hall by the Ramblers Federation, and we notified all the rambling clubs that this was going to happen. There was about 12 rambling clubs represented at this meeting, and we decided that we would make a mass trespass from Moorland Bridge through the valley there, right over to Brumhead Moors, and then to Abbey Brook.
The Abbey Brook Trespass, Sunday, September the 18th, 1932.
When we met at Moorland Bridge, the press didn't know anything about it, and we didn't know whether the police or the gamekeepers did. So we walked up the Loxley Valley and over to the brook, and when we got towards the shooting blocks of Major Brumhead, we saw the police on top of the hill. There's a large hill there, and as we approached the butts, they all came down the hillside, and I should say there was about 30 policemen at the time, and about 40 gamekeepers. And the gamekeepers had got pick shafts, and the police had got dogs. And they approached us and told us we'd got to go back. And a colleague called Hardy of Shipton Street Settlement was in charge of the ramble, and he said, well, he says, if you want to stop a trespass, you must put the people onto the nearest major road. That's the ruling and the law. And the police wouldn't listen to it. They said, no, you've got to go back. They said they were persistent that we must go back. And he said, well, sit down a minute and let's talk this out. So we all sat down again. He says, now, are you hungry? So we all shouted, yes. So he said, well, then get your rucksacks off, get your flasks out, and get your grub out. And get down, and we're stopping here while we've eaten it. We know it, we're not in any hurry. And we followed what he said and all started eating, and the gamekeepers were getting annoyed, and they all got pick shafts. And they were getting very annoyed with it all, and the police were a bit upset, and one or two of the gamekeepers started doing a bit of pushing to one or two of the lads, but the police stopped them and told them they weren't having any of that. It got to be, you know, he was in charge, the police officer, and he said, we're going to see that everything's in order, and we don't want that. But one of the gamekeepers did push one of the ILP lads, and straight away he hit back at the gamekeeper and hit him hard. And the police immediately grabbed them both and told them that had got to stop. So ultimately we decided that we were walking back then. We'd go back, but we'd go at our own time and own pace and own way. And we made it as long as ever we could. And the police kept saying, you know, you could cut a bit, and we said, well, this is what we intend doing, and we're going to do it.
For another member of the party, the trespass will always hold a special memory.
I don't know how it started, but suddenly there was an argument going on, you see, among a number of them, with our lads, with some of our lads. Then they started lashing out, and I remember getting caught across the back of the legs one of these days and going down plonk into this pool of peat water, which wet me, not badly, but I was wet. But of course, unfortunately, it became a subject of discussion. You know it is among crowds of young people, my wet arse.
A group of youngsters from the Woodcraft Folk, a cooperative youth group, were also on the trespass. One of them, a girl of 16, kept a diary of the day's events.
Pleasant to see so many woodcraft folk ready for the mass trespass on Sunday. I think there were more woodcrafters than anybody. We managed to get off pretty well to time and went through the Wisewers estate, over Wasley Common, over Kirkhead, and so on to the top side of Bradfield for dinner. Of course, we got plenty of stares as we marched along singing woodcraft and Bolshoi songs. After dinner, We all set off for small fields where the mass trespass was to start from. We were all told to keep together and no names were to be mentioned. When we arrived at the beginning of the moors, 2 gamekeepers were there with a man on a bike. The gamekeeper advised us to go back, and as we went straight on, he sent the cyclists with a message, we presumed to get assistance. The next part of the journey was about 5 miles of rough moorland, up and down tufts of grass and falling in bogs. When we got to Peter's Rock, which is a point overlooking Abbey Brook, we met with opposition in the form of about 40 gamekeepers, among whom were a few policemen. Someone said that we ought to make our way down to the shooting butts, but others said we ought to carry on over the edge to Falston Dell. A gamekeeper was in the vicinity, and after a meeting of the executive committee, which all took time, we agreed to carry on. But in the meantime, the gamekeepers whom we had seen in the bottom, they of course rounded up on us and stopped us, but only by the use of big pit props. 2 lads got it worse than any of us, as one refused to give his name and address. After much discussion and argument, we set off back across the way we had come, accompanied this time by the policemen and gamekeepers who kept urging us on. But they swallowed the remarks very well, which we all could not resist from making, and I am sure they must have enjoyed their 5-mile walk on a Sunday afternoon. We shall make them into ramblers yet, and neither have they defeated us yet. It was a full day of excitement, although we had to turn back, but numbers make a difference. Next time we want 1,000, not 200.
Did these mass trespasses really achieve anything, though?
Well, people disagree now, just as they did at the time. Here's Stephen Morton, a past president of the Sheffield Ramblers Federation.
My reaction immediately, and I can't deny it, it's appeared in print, was this is going to set us back, because we had just received the first intimation that the landowners and their agents were prepared to meet us and discuss possible means of allowing access on high-level lands.
Benny Rothman sees it differently.
The extent and the lengths that they went to deal with 400 or 500 or 600 youngsters just walking on the moors when they concentrated, 1/3 of the Derbyshire police force, it completely negates the statements that even today that some of the rambling organisations make, that it was just like, you know, a storm in a teacup, and the only reason it's remembered is because a few people went to jail. It's a lot more than that, because even if it didn't have any profound impression on the rambling organisations, it did on the establishment. They made sure that this wasn't going to happen again.
But surely the trespasses made it more difficult to get a law passed in Parliament to open the moors up to people.
Well, you can't get a bill passed through Parliament unless you're determined to do something about it. And I don't think if we'd have depended on the Clarion Ramblers and that type of I don't think we should have ever got the bill through Parliament. And the access to the mountains and open spaces was got through the Ramblers who were prepared to take some sort of action.
The trespasses stirred people up and made them more aware of the issues. In June 1932, over 10,000 walkers came to a rally in Winnett's Pass near Castleton to protest at the jail sentences imposed on the Kinder Trespassers. It gave added strength to the fight for access.
We had to prove that we were determined, that we'd got something in mind. We'd got a vision of the country. We used to sing, the land, it's God who gave the land, this ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with the ballot in our hand when God gave the land to the people? I can remember once on a ramble, the lads being stopped, and the KP said, you're going back, and they said, wow, well, what about it? It's our land. It isn't. It's the owner of the manor lodge land. He says, well, how did he get it? He said, well, his ancestors fought for it. He said, fetch him in, we'll fight him for it.
In 1949, the system of national parks was set up by the post-war Labour government. These were supposed to look after the moorland and to extend the land which was open to the public to walk over. Although better than what had gone before, not everyone is happy at the rate of change. Here's Stephen Morton again.
It was the will of Parliament and people arrangements should be made for them to be free as long ago as 1949, and it seems a shame that in 1982 so little attention has been paid to this demand.
Today, nearly 40 years after the Peak Park Authority was created, over 3/4 of the moorland in the Peak District is still not subject to any access agreements whatsoever. These 27 moors are all officially closed to the public. Many of them are still owned by private landowners. Number 23, Axe Edge Moor, is owned by the Earl of Derby. Numbers 8, 9 and 10, Midhope Moor, Pikelow and Upper Commons, are owned by R. Culver, the chairman of T. Ragg and Sons of Loxley, while numbers 11 and 12, Broomhead Moor and Middle Moss, belong to R. Rimington Wilson, the Sheffield snuff manufacturer. However, a number of others belong to public authorities, like water and electricity boards, as well as the council. Number 7, Thurleston Moor, belongs to the Yorkshire Water Authority. Numbers 17, 18 and 19, Big Moor, Ramsley Moor and Leash Fern Moor, belong to the Severn Trent Water Authority, while one of the largest moors near Sheffield, number 18, Hallam, belongs to Sheffield City Council's Estates Department. None of these are officially open to the public.
So what's holding us up? Why can't we get access to these moors?
A local land researcher describes why.
Well, within the Peak National Park and on those moors adjacent to Sheffield, my information is that all exploration licences have now been granted to Rio Tinto's Inc. And I think it's very questionable whether those licences would have been granted if those moors had been negotiated into the access land by the National Park before the application was made. I should imagine it would be very difficult to know whether they even started doing it. You know, a few blokes would go onto the moor with a bit of machinery and they'd be gone probably in a couple of days. Whether they've done it yet, I don't know. I'm sure they won't tell us if we ask them anyway. Threats in the future are going to come from the mineral extraction industry, particularly now that rare and trace minerals, which require quite substantial movement of hillsides just to get small amounts out, these minerals are becoming more important to high technology industries, and clearly in a period of economic decline the pressure for extracting those even from the very heart of the national parks is going to be almost irresistible. There is a similar threat to that in terms of the search by the nuclear fuels industry for dumps for their nuclear waste, which they would very much like to have as far away from view as possible, sort of put it out of sight and it'll be out of mind. I think the most serious threat is the agricultural revolution that's taken place since the war. There's something like 1/4 of all the hedgerows in the United Kingdom have gone already. Inside the Exmoor National Park, 1/5 of the moorlands have gone under the plough. 1/3 of the North Yorkshire moors have gone under the plough. Now, at present, we are fairly well protected within the Peak District National Park. It's been a very good park, but there's recently been some controversy about the way the ministry appear now to be using their power of appointment to stack the composition of the National Parks Committee in favour of the interests of the agricultural business.
But surely the council could buy up the moors so that everybody could walk on them.
What local authorities around here have got money to spend bribing the snuff manufacturers and the earls and dukes and even the water authority to prevent them from exploiting this land. If they can make more money by ploughing it up and having ryegrass monoculture on it than they can make at present out of the grouse shooting, then I'm quite sure that they'll do that. That's why these moors were seized by private owners in the first place.
Anyway, the council owns some of the moors already, and they haven't said people can walk on them, have they?
Well, if you ask me, it doesn't seem as if we've come very far since the 1930s, despite all the demos, trespasses and acts of Parliament. Are people still fighting for access?
Yes, they are, and they're having to use the same methods of trespassing. The Kinder and Abbey Brook trespasses are not just events in the past that can be safely celebrated. They're influencing a whole new campaign to open up access to those areas of moorland still closed to the public. Dick Williams describes the aims of this new campaign.
We felt that there was a need to actually raise that campaign again, to renew it, and to create a mass campaign which would appeal to all sections of the outdoor world, not only for climbers, for ramblers, fell walkers and so on, but basically for anyone who just enjoyed an afternoon, a picnic or whatever in the countryside.
What about the government? Can't they do anything?
Whose interests are the government trying to serve? Are they really sort of out to secure the sort of access that we want as ramblers and climbers? Or are they in fact out really to placate us at the expense of ensuring that the mineral companies, that the oil companies and that the British nuclear fuels actually get their way? One of the failings, I think, of the past 50 years has been not to actually capitalise on the enthusiasm, on the struggles of the individual groups and people concerned with the trespassers and the campaigns of the 30s. And to build on that, to build a broad-based political campaign.
Unless we follow on in a way that the mass trespassers of 32 did not follow on, unless we continue in the way we have started and continue to keep the pressure on, it'll go the way as it did before.
It can never be finished. It can never be finished till we own the country and run the country. That's the only time you can finish it.
I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday. Now I've been over Snowdon, I've camped upon Crowdon, and slept by the white stones as well. I've frozen on Kinder, been burnt to a cinder, and many more tales I can tell. My rucksack has oft been my pillow, the heather has oft been my bed. But sooner than part from the mountains, I think I would rather be dead. I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday. Now the day was just ending as I was descending down Grinds Brook along by the Tor, when a voice said, "Hey you!" in the way keepers do. He'd the worst face that I ever saw. The tone of his voice was unfriendly. In the teeth of his fury I said, "Man, sooner than part from the mountains, I think I would rather be dead." I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday. Well, he called me a louse, he said, "Think of the grouse," and I did, but I still could not see why old Kinder Scout and the moors round about couldn't hold both the poor grouse and me. He said, "All this land is my master's," but at that I stood shaking my head, for no man has a right to the mountains any more than the deep ocean bed. I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday.
I once courted a maid, a spot welder by trade. She was fairest of all and in bloom, and the blue of her eye matched the blue moorland sky, and I loved her from April till June. On the day that we should have been married, I went for a ramble instead, for sooner than part from the mountains, I think I would rather be dead. I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday. So I go where I will, over valley and hill, and I lie where the bracken is deep. I belong to the mountains, the pure crystal fountains, where the rocks are both rugged and steep. I've seen the white hare in the heather, the curlew fly high overhead, but sooner than part from the mountains I love, I think I would rather be dead. I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasure the hard-going way. I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I am a free man on Sunday.